Thanks for joining us, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Stephen Kaplan, president of the University of New Haven for, what, 16 years?
Yes.
So you're only the 6th president.
I am.
So you stay a long time.
Most of us have. Actually, all of us have, yeah.
So, all right. So I invited you on because we're going to talk about 100 years, the centennial of UNH.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting stuff, right?
Very exciting, yeah.
What's going to happen in 2020 as far as events?
We've actually already started celebrating the centennial, at least preparing people for the fact that we're moving into our centennial year. We had what we called a road show, where we took the university on the road. Normally we have a large scholarship ball, about 500 attendees on the campus each April. Instead, in April, we were in Boston with about 250 guests, mainly graduates of the university. In May, we were in New York City at the Pierre, and in February, we'll kick off the actual centennial in Boca Raton, where we have a lot of alums.
Good choice, February in the winter.
Very good choice.
Yeah, very good choice on your part. All right, so over 100 years, the campus has changed so much.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to talk about your background a little bit, too, which I find fascinating. Chicago, your dad was a shoe store owner.
Yeah.
And your mom was a comedian? She
was, and an actress.
Tell me about this.
So my father, actually, most people think university president come from parents who are academics, right? They went to college. My father's father was a Russian immigrant who opened a shoe store on Halsted Street in Chicago, and he died when my father was 13. My father had to drop out of high school to help his mother run the shoe store, and he spent his life in the shoe business. He was a salesman. People always say you're a good fundraiser, and I said, well, it's genetic. My father was a salesman, and my mother also grew up in Chicago, Russian, Hungarian immigrants. And I think at age 8, she was playing Little Orphan Annie on the radio. And you know Second City in Chicago. She was involved in the founding and emergence of Second City. She had kids. And she did stand-up comedy her whole life.
Did you find her funny?
Absolutely.
As
did my kids, as did my entire family.
Now, you're also a ballroom dancer, and you love opera.
Yeah.
Did that come from Mom? Dad?
No, actually, no. Neither one of them were dancers. Oh, they danced, but they weren't as into it as my wife and I are. And on the musical side, that's all kind of something I developed when I was in college and have remained passionate about. Same with my love of art.
Do you have classes at UNH on ballroom dancing?
You
should put some in.
We actually, in our rec center, every now and then we have some for the students. Not for faculty and staff, which we probably should do.
Well, I want video of you doing that. I think that would be awesome. All right, so let's take a trip down memory lane if we can. And we've got a lot of pictures.
Good.
UNH has grown to almost 7,000 undergrads now. And it's sort of like the little engine that could, right?
Yeah.
It just grew and grew and
Absolutely.
grew. So let's start with the first picture.
Sure.
This was not yesterday. This was a long time ago. Do you know anything about this picture at all?
I do. It's 1923, I believe. Our first class entered in 1920. It was a 2-year program. They were all working adults. I'd have to count now, but it's a small handful of men.
Yeah, I noticed that right off. In
the middle is one woman, Bella Cohn, and the story is that at commencement, the gentleman let her go first.
Really?
Yeah. And it was primarily, these were all either business or engineering majors.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so this might be science. I'm thinking. I see
closer.
Yeah, I see.
It's a lab, right?
Yes, yeah. So probably 1920s, 1930s?
Probably mid-1920s. We were then on the Yale campus.
Yeah, tell me how that moved, how the actual cornerstones kind of moved.
So we were founded as a branch of Northeastern in Boston as a 2-year YMCA school. And eventually we moved to become independent. But in 1922, I believe, when this class was still at the university, we moved into, we were in Sheffield Hall and Winchester Hall at Yale, the engineering school buildings. And we started offering engineering classes and business classes, mainly taught by Yale faculty. So my understanding is the faculty helped us broker the arrangement with Yale that we could move into the Yale campus for evening classes, which is when their classes were underutilized. And supposedly, the faculty at Yale that taught for us had a vision that Yale would meet the global needs in business and engineering, and we would meet the local needs and we have for the last 100 years.
Is there any discussion, and I'm sure there is, University of New Haven, but it's in West Haven? So how often does that come up?
Actually, not very often.
So it's just me.
No.
Like most people would think it's in New Haven.
Somehow
it's in
we
West
dodged
Haven.
it. In fact, I had an enrollment vice president who was a great guy, a giant teddy bear, just lively and an incredible individual. And he walked in my office one day, bigger than life, with a T-shirt he had made up. And on the front it said, University of New Haven, the Yale of the... And on the back it said West Haven.
You should sell those.
Well, I actually told him I didn't think Yale would like it and we couldn't use it.
Yeah, there's that whole copyright thing, right? All right, so we have another classroom setting that's, I don't know, 30s, 40s?
Probably in the 30s.
Yeah.
Clearly on the Yale campus.
And then we have some buildings.
And then in 1960, a couple of faculty went out to lunch at Jimmy's in West Haven.
No kidding.
And they were driving back, and somehow they drove by this building, which was for sale by the state. It was a former state orphanage. And they went back and told Elias Maxey, the then director, he wasn't called president back then, about the property. He went and looked at it, and he said, we've outgrown the buildings at Yale. Let's buy this. He went back to Yale. It was 50-something acres, and asked Yale if they would loan us the $360,000 to buy this property and to move into our own campus. So they helped us once again 40 years into this endeavor. The funniest part of this for me personally is I turned down the job of provost, senior academic vice president at UNH in 2001 to take on the chancellor's job of the University of Virginia's only branch campus. They reached out to me 3 years later to come back and apply for the presidency, which I obviously did. That campus was on the former site of a county orphanage. So I'm certainly the only president of a university in the country that has been the president of, CEO of 2 campuses, and probably the only campuses established in a former orphanage. And when I came to UNH in 2004 as the president, there were still in all of the classrooms in this building chalkboards this high up from the ground.
Oh.
Because of the fact that it was an orphanage up until we took it over, and no one had bothered to take down the chalkboards from the little kids.
That must be put in a museum somewhere, I would think, just because how interesting is that?
It's got a fascinating history. We had a former policeman when I first came, and our police were armed, who was afraid to go into the top story of this building because he was convinced there were ghosts there.
Have you seen any?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
So we're past that. The students don't have to worry. Now this I love. I mean, parking at the university, you've had to be juggling around a little bit. And back in the day, these are just awesome cars. You and I talked about this.
Yeah,
I'd love to have one of them. So you've figured out the parking. You've grown immensely.
We have not figured out the parking. When I meet, when I meet with students and faculty and open it up for questions, I say I'm willing to entertain any question as long as it's not about parking.
So then I just asked it.
And I often tell people, like I just said, I was at the University of Virginia prior to coming here, and there's an historical story, it's factual, that at the first meeting of the Board of Visitors, the governing board of the University of Virginia, with Thomas Jefferson at the head of the table, and to his right, James Monroe, and to the left, James Madison, and other people on their board, but 3 former presidents, they spent the entire meeting debating whether to allow horses and buggies on campus. In other words, they discussed parking. Parking. So we've moved not only those cars, but almost all of the cars off of the main campus and onto the periphery. And so even though...
So you're figuring it out.
Oh, when I came, it was a giant parking lot, and I said the cars have to go. And we have. And people adjust.
They do.
So that parking lot's gone, and most every other parking lot.
There's probably a building there now.
There are buildings on all those sites.
Now, here's a sign, New Haven College, University of New Haven. What's the story behind this?
So we went from the 2-year program. In 1958, we were renamed New Haven College. We started offering bachelor's degrees as opposed to just associate degrees. And then in 1970, as we were celebrating our 50th anniversary, we just started offering an MBA, an executive, equivalent of an executive MBA, and a master's in systems engineering, industrial engineering. And in 1970, to celebrate that move to graduate programs, we were renamed the University of New Haven.
A little bit before my time, but not much. All right, so this is a newer building, the same building?
This is the orphanage
This is
that you just saw an aerial of. You can see the parking lots are gone.
Can you imagine the work that had to be done inside there to just retrofit it to classrooms and everything else?
Oh, there's still, we've renovated probably 80–90% of this building.
Still more to go.
But there's still some remnants of the old orphanage.
And then is this when you first moved in?
So this is a shot in 1960, 61,
Okay.
62. Those were the only two buildings. The orphanage and the so-called gatehouse, which was the entrance to the orphanage, as you can see. We now have 70-some buildings on the site.
And how big is your acreage there?
So the main campus is about 55 acres.
Yep.
We have another 25 on the north campus across the street, which is all the athletics. So I've been here 15 and a half years. We've gone from 800,000 square feet to almost 1.5 million.
Are you going to buy up more parcels of land, do you think?
I'd rather not say that and scare the neighbors, but,
Yeah,
but if anyone's selling, we're buying.
Yeah, because you're growing, right?
Yeah.
All right, this is another picture of the ivy growing on the building, which kind of reminds me of Yale a little bit. Where is that, do you know?
So that, to the best of my knowledge, is, and I haven't seen this picture for a long time, that's one of the buildings we were in on the Yale campus.
Ah, okay.
This is probably right before we moved, based on, that car's probably a 1950s model. But yeah, that's, as far as I recall, that looks like one of the buildings that's subsequently been torn down. When you go into Sheffield Hall now, which is the engineering building at Yale, which is, like I said, where we were founded, there's still a plaque saying that it's the site of the former engineering building. It has a new name now.
Oh, how
new
neat.
donor. There's Sheffield and Winchester were the guns, right?
Well, of course. Now, this is near and dear to my heart. This is the early audio visual, and you've upgraded a lot since then. And we go to the next one, and I'm sure this is a radio station of maybe the 60s or something like that.
So that's the radio station, which was established in 68, 69, I think. The picture you just showed of the young man with the camera reminds me of my first day on campus. I was walking into my office, and a faculty member, Paul Falcone, who I mentioned earlier, came up. I didn't know him, and he introduced himself, and he had a student with him that looked like this student. He looked like he was still in high school, like he was 15, 16. He had just graduated, and he was holding something, and he revealed it, and it was an Emmy Award. He had just won an Emmy. He was at ESPN. He was a brand new graduate. So that was my introduction to our media program.
Well, pretty impressive,
pretty
right?
Impressive.
All right, now we've got an aerial view of some type. You're still growing, right?
That's the campus with the, in the foreground, the engineering building. To the left is the Peterson Library and the Student Center. So at that point, this is probably 1975.
Okay.
We were up to about 5 or 6 buildings.
All right, and then next picture. We're growing,
So now, this is current.
And what is that building?
So the building in the front is it's the Sam and Lois Bergamy Center for Innovation, Science, Technology, and Innovation. It's the building behind it is the engineering building. The modern building to the left is the physical plant for engineering in this new building. And this is a cutting edge, it's a classroom building like you would find at Stanford in the design school.
I think
It's
that's terrific.
fully flexible. It's got a so-called maker space for students across the campus to come in and create things. And no one owns anything in this building except actually the TV studio, which is the brick section on the bottom left.
So I love that you'll take us on at some point.
We'll take you in, but otherwise it's purely interdisciplinary.
It's awesome. All right, and here's a building with a centennial flags.
David A. Beckerman Recreation Center. It's just celebrated its 12th anniversary, and that's where I just came from, the treadmill in the
Well, I can tell
Center.
you're all working out and all that stuff. All right, and here's another picture. I think this is at nighttime.
This is our campus in orange.
Yep.
This is the former Hubble Electronics facility. It's about 70,000 square feet on 53 acres on the Merritt Parkway. And they called me 7 years ago and wanted 15 million. And I said no thanks. And then they wanted 12 million, and I said no thanks. And when they came down to 6 million, I went out and looked at it, and I said, what if we gave you 3 and you gifted the other half? And they did. So it's one of the,
I like your style,
one of the great real
Steve.
estate deals
Yep.
in history.
Nicely
And
done.
It houses our business school.
And that's not even full yet. I've been in that building.
Oh, no,
it's
it's not.
It's huge.
At night, it's fairly full. In the day, we've just started basically transporting business school undergraduate business school students out there.
Alrighty, and we have 2 more pictures. This is new-ish.
So the one on the right is the engineering building. Behind it is, but not in this photo, is the new Innovation Center. This is the Henry C. Lee building, named after
Oh, sure.
our famous forensic scientist. And it's actually, so it's the Lee Institute building that houses Henry's Global Institute for Forensic Science. The building's named after John and Leona Gehring, recently deceased, who left a rather substantial estate behind for the university, and we're good friends.
And then finally, another area of how massive this school has become.
So that's the main campus. On the bottom right, that blue athletic field is our football field. So that gives you a sense of the so-called North Campus. And the main campus, it's blue because our colors are blue and gold.
The Chargers.
As you can see from my tie.
Yes, nicely done.
Thank you. It's our centennial tie. And
oh, you're selling them.
Centennial.
Centennial ties.
We're giving them away.
Oh, you're giving them away. Oh.
Do we have scarves and obviously to select people?
Yeah, people who went to school there.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to talk about some of the notables.
Sure.
Dean Lombardi, longtime general manager in the National Hockey League and a two-time Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah.
Tom Lewis, head of technology for the Reagan White House, who earned the Presidential Medal of Service at 32 and later was CEO of Ameritrade, not too shabby.
Right.
Mary Tengestal,
yeah.
the first and only African-American woman to fly the Air Force's U-2 spy plane. Incredible.
Incredible.
And Amra Al-Tawil,
yeah.
a Saudi princess who is an advocate for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. So how much of you, what is the percentage of students on campus that are not from this country? How does it divvy up that way?
So our international student population, undergraduate is rather small, maybe 3%. Graduate, it's almost a third. In engineering, which is where most of the international students are, it's almost 70%.
Wow.
That's not uncommon in engineering schools across the country. And they're remarkable students. They often stay here. They get the visas that allow them to go into technology. And many go home and help transform their economies. But the international students truly enrich the campus. We and others have had a rough ride in recent years because of challenges for international students getting visas. But we're working on it.
Yeah.
We've actually weathered the storm a lot better than most of the other schools in Connecticut because we have such strong ties and long histories in some of these countries. It's not true of some of our competitors.
Of the 16 years you've been there, what do you still have to do? I mean, the place is just growing by leaps and bounds. What's still coming?
So, you know, and about 6, 7 years into my presidency, I walk every day. And I decided to put on my workout clothes and walk the campus and the neighborhood. And I came back, and a few of my vice presidents were in the parking lot. And I said, I can't believe how much we've done, right? And the reason I hadn't noticed it is most people will tell you I'm always moving. I'm always working. And when I'm on the treadmill or I'm walking, I'm either on the phone.
You're a multitasker.
I'm always at it.
Yeah.
And so even though I think we've accomplished a lot, we've more than doubled the institution, we've increased the net assets 7-fold, we've increased our endowment by enormous sums, but there's still a lot to do. And first and foremost, we are doing a lot now in the health sciences. We're catching up to some of our competitors and hopefully moving ahead of them in some areas.
And entrepreneurial
We've got an incredible entrepreneurship program,
Yep.
and we're doing a lot to get back to our roots. We were founded to serve the business and engineering needs. When I came to engineering school, I had 400 students, and now has 1,400. And we're doing, so when we were founded, Connecticut was a manufacturing state with an emphasis on machinery and so forth. We're not in that business anymore, which is our mechanical engineering program. We're in advanced manufacturing, which means we're going to help them build the artificial intelligence and robotics to really bring manufacturing back.
As we talk about the past and the future, and as we wrap this up, 16 years on campus, when you go out and talk about the University of New Haven, what's a favorite story that you share? And it could be funny, because again, your mother was funny. So what's the story?
It depends on the audience.
Who you're talking to.
Well, you asked about my love of opera, and one of my favorite stories is when I first came and we did an alumni gathering in Washington, among other places. Our Congresswoman, Rosa DeLauro, was asked to introduce me in this beautiful room in the U.S. Senate, and 150, 200 people, and she improvises. She had a few notes, right, but she speaks extemporaneously. And she said, and finally, I want you to know that Steve Kaplan is a great love her. And she turned red, and I turned red. And she looked down at her notes, and she looked up, and she said, of opera.
But I'm bump, right?
So on the humorous side, that's one of my favorite stories. When I'm talking to alums, and you asked about some of the people you just mentioned, I talk about the stories. UNH has some of the most remarkable stories of any university in the country. Incredible success stories. Our board chair, Bill Bucknall, was head of human resources for United Technologies globally. His father was a milkman. Charlie Pompey, who's one of our biggest donors and is a remarkable success story, painted houses to get through high school, and then when he went to the University of New Haven, he threw beer parties. It was every Thursday night, because on Friday everyone went home, and a keg of beer was, whatever it was, $6, and women were free. So the women would come for the free beer, and the men would come knowing that the women were going to come. A lot of marriages came out of the university.
I'm sure.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs. You mentioned Tom Lewis. Again, at 32, he was given the Presidential Medal in the Reagan White House, ran all of technology. He came to New Haven to study at the Culinary Institute and ended up studying computer science at the University of New Haven for his graduate degree, and is a remarkable entrepreneur.
Well, I will tell you, you're a long way from Chicago, but Connecticut is better off. The university is doing great. Stephen Kaplan, thank you so much for being here. And let's see what you do the next 100 years.
I doubt I'll be here, but I'm sure the university will do great things.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Spend all night kissing, and if one was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store, but mine just to save time. Skip right ahead to the nice ride.